Well, today we're going to talk about the differences between a 160 score and a 170 score.
Yeah.
So, we really want to get into the nitty gritty of how does it feel from one segment to another? How do you travel from one type of test taker to another?
Mhm.
So, let's go ahead and jump in.
Yeah. This is something that we've talked about before, but there definitely are stages as you're studying. And one thing you'll notice is that when you're at different stages, your um, understanding of the test is obviously different, but there's certain things that people in different stages do differently. So I would say one thing I've noticed for, once you're in the 170 range is that you're uh, more aware of what you don't know.
Yeah.
Um, that is to say, you kind of know the box that you're operating in. Whereas I think sometimes in the 160s, you're you're more confident in things that you actually don't understand too well.
Yep. Yeah, and it's a little counterintuitive, right? It seems a bit
Yeah,
paradoxical that the more skilled you get at something, uh, including the LSAT here in this instance, that the more you recognize what you don't know,
yeah,
and where your uncertainties lie. But that's true of all fields, I believe. There's something, some broader effect, like the expert effect. Like once you become an expert in something, like you actually understand how much you don't know,
yeah,
and it takes that level of expertise to even really to have that kind of acknowledgement of how much you really don't know. I've seen people who are in like the 130s or 140s feeling very confident that they know what's going on with the exam, but obviously there's a lot of room for improvement there. um, but it's just very hard when you don't have like a really really strong foundation to understand yourself, like how big of a gap there is between where you are and maybe where you want to be.
definitely. And I think a lot of it comes down to understanding the intricacies, as in, say you're in the 150s, 160s, it's very kind of like broad picture stuff. But once you
Yeah.
get into the 170s, it's very granular, right? Where it's like switching this word, what would it do? And it's kind of like you're able to see so much more, and um, you're you're still operating in that space. But one thing I tell people is, um, you talk to people that are like comfortably in the 170s, and um, you know, they're like reading through RC, and it's like, they're like very comfortable with ambiguity. Like, I recognize I don't understand this part
Yeah.
too well, but I understand the structure, and I know what they're trying to get at. The particulars I'm not too sure about, but I'm okay. And I keep going. Whereas I think maybe in the 160s or 150s, you're either very confident, or um, you don't navigate as well. Maybe you run into a roadblock. It's like, oh, I don't know, like I'm stumbling. But there seems to be a level of like comfort with ambiguity
Yeah.
that I see with higher scores.
Yeah, and I think sometimes, when you are in the lower ends of the scale, that there's so much ambiguity that
Yeah,
it can feel very uncomfortable. And maybe
yeah,
you don't feel like you actually do have a hold of the structure of the thing yet, even
yeah,
because there is so much uncertainty that you're dealing with. Whereas once you hit that 170 mark, there's much less uncertainty overall. You may be aware of more of it, but it becomes a manageable amount where you can say, okay, yeah, I don't know exactly what that term means, or I don't know really, this one sentence seems out of place for me, and that doesn't seem to like fit here within the broader context of this reading comp passage. But that's okay. I get the sense of the structure, and if they do ask me about that, I'm kind of clocking it. I know where to come back to spend a little more time to maybe try to get some clarity.
yeah. And a lot of what we're saying there is like, it's almost like a sort of hardiness, right? Like you've taken a lot of punches. You've been in the trenches, so that
Yeah.
when things oh, that RC passage was a little tough. I can keep going. I'm still very like like calm as steel, very unrattled, I would say. Because one thing that we've talked about a lot on here is it in doing something like high performance one time. It's a moving average, right? You're gonna have a bad day. You're gonna have like your like normally like you're within this range, and you're gonna have like a really like spot on day.
Yeah.
And I think what you notice is with high scores, their psychology is a little bit stronger, so that um, they're operating within a more like a range to be expected. Whereas I think in the 160s, it's like I'm a 167 score. Oh no, the next one's 160. It's a lot of um, like little things that are not accounted for. But you see with the higher scores, there's a level of comfort with they're not as rattled. They're a little bit more in control, and also they tend to know what went wrong. Whereas I think in the 160s, there's a lot of surprises. We're like, oh, I got that wrong. But in the 170s, like, number 18, like, I knew this one I was a little uncomfortable with.
Yeah. I had it flagged, right? And
Yeah. Yeah.
I knew I was in a 50-50, and
Yeah.
turns out it was the other way versus the one that I picked.
Yeah.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. And at that 160 mark, you are, you're getting quite a bit of it correct, right? You're
Yeah.
doing a pretty good job, right? 160 is a pretty solid place to be. But there is a lot of things moving in and out of your awareness from test to test. And there's a lot of things that you may have felt confident on that you ended up getting incorrect as well, just because the highest level tricks that they have may slide by your radar
Yeah.
versus someone with a 170 has a much more attuned radar to be like, all right, there's something going on there that's not right. I'm not exactly sure. Otherwise, I'd be able to get it right. But there's something here that just doesn't feel right, or this word I'm really uncomfortable with, or their intuitions definitely do get stronger.
Yeah.
Was that your experience as well as you moved through the scale?
Definitely. And I think a big part in that was like pattern recognition, right? Where I think once you're in like high 160s, like 170s, once you're like comfortably within that range, you notice there's a lot of oh, I mean, of course there's a lot of recycled concepts, but you see one question and it's a part of like a bigger body of like questions within that range, right?
Yep.
Like you see like some like math type questions thrown in there, or um like something with percentages, or like part versus whole, and it's part of like a bigger body of work that you've seen, and maybe you've tripped on. So I think
Yeah.
that pattern recognition um is really um big. A lot of it is like you're just aware of so much more, right? And
Yeah, and it's more
yeah.
comfortable too. You've seen especially the math ones, right? That's a great example because sometimes people see them and you see them physically shut down. They're
Yeah,
just
yeah,
like,
this is not for me.
this is
I
not what
did
I'm
this
here for.
exactly. Yeah.
Right. But if you're a very high score, if you've seen a lot of this, and you really understand the box that the LSAT kind of lives within,
Yeah.
you're not getting anything even algebra, right?
Yeah.
Any of these concepts are going to be very, very fundamental. They're not testing your math skills in the way that perhaps the GRE or the GMAT might.
Yeah.
And certainly not to like any specificity that perhaps the MCAT may with some of the biology or
Yeah.
chemistry type subject matters that are on there. So you don't have to feel like you're that feeling of overwhelmed because the kind of the rules of the game. And the rules of the game are like, you can't make me do, or not that you can't, but you're probably not going to include on the test, you know, anything that includes having to figure out a square root, right?
Yeah.
It's probably not
Yeah.
going to happen unless it's 9 or something like that.
Yeah.
Or so like it's very, very simple, basic stuff.
Yeah. I think one thing I was talking to with someone recently is, they were like in the mid 160s, and they're like, I like sometimes get into 170s. I'm not fully there. One thing I've definitely noticed with myself and working with high scorers is it, the review and the studying is very different. when you're in the two ranges, where it almost feels like when you're, in the 170s, obviously the margin for error is uh, much, much lower, right?
Yeah.
Uh, is that the direction? You know what I'm saying? Where it's like, it's almost like when you're going through it, um, it's kind of like you're just going through the process. Like, all right, like 1 to 15, okay, like just going through an emotion, right? Like been there, done that. Like this is all just part of the process, and it's like you're just waiting to battle those like 2 to 3 questions where you're at a fork, and it's like the whole thing that you did was just to get to this process, right? Where it's like, or what's my like decision making um like
Yeah.
process, and going through, it's like you're going through an emotion, you already have like 95% down, and it's just like for these last little bits. So I know for the high scores it tends to be like um just those small battles that, and recreating, like putting yourself in those instances where it's like, or like, now what am I going to do differently? Whereas I think in the 160s there's still so much to learn. You say you get like 12 wrong or 14 wrong, there's like still like gaps in understanding, and it's like a different review process, I would say.
Yeah, for sure. And it makes me kind of think of, any, you know, even, whitewater rafting. So like when you start rafting, you're just like trying to survive. You're holding on for dear life. If you make it
Yeah,
from, from put
yeah,
in to takeout,
yeah,
that's a win.
yeah,
You did it. Like that. That's
yeah.
great. As you progress and progress, and I have some friends who are really accomplished hardshell kayakers, and their lines become tighter and tighter and smaller, and they're
Razor.
trying to
Yeah,
hit
yeah,
this very specific point on the river. Whereas newbies, and when I was beginning, you're just you're bouncing off rocks. You just,
yeah,
as long as your
yeah,
head's above water and you
yeah.
keep moving
I
downstream,
just don't want to drown.
I
Yeah,
just don't want to drown. Yeah,
yeah,
not drowning is
yeah.
the goal. But you get a finer and finer level of detail. You learn what eddy lines are. You learn
Yeah.
how the water moves over certain features and what to avoid and what to go towards, and all of that. Your vision changes. Like the
Yes.
amount of detail you can see on the river. It starts off just by being this big river,
Big
and by
monster.
the end, there's all these different features and all these different places that you can go and things that you can do within the broader context. So like as you're like a 160 score, you may be seeing the river and some of the basic features, but
Yeah.
as you become like a 170 score, you may see that tiny eddy that's behind this rock over here, or you may see something, a pour over or something, or a hole that somebody else hadn't seen or wouldn't have clocked.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like, especially like once you start entering the 160s, you start to notice, because I feel like when you first start, say like, you know, oftentimes people like go to like a free like maybe like webinar, or like there's something where it's like, okay guys, we're gonna like go over like this question, and people are like, wow, like we're spending so much time just on one question, and that's like, we're unfamiliar with how the game works, right? But in the 160, you're kind of getting a feel for the review process, like, okay, like um I'm like starting to build a system that works, but um I feel like maybe not so much the 160s, but definitely I noticed in like the very like earlier stages, say like 140s, 150s, it's there's a mindset of like, I'm gonna power through. I'm just gonna keep taking it, like another section. And it's like,
Yeah.
if we talk about sports, right? Like I was talking to someone recently about like baseball, and I was like, well, the answer is not in taking more practice tests, right? Because if we don't, uh, maybe golf is a better analogy, where we can keep practicing our swing, but if the technique isn't there, right, we're gonna keep
Yeah.
cementing like bad form. So
Right.
before I take another swing, say like take another section, I want to make sure that I learn from what I just did, and I adjust a little bit. So I think, um, yeah, I remember like studying with my study buddies, trying to like get comfortably mid 170s. The we'd spend so much time just like on a handful of questions, and it would it would be like so in depth, and it's like, wow, just for a couple questions. So um yeah, it's like the eddy line here, and this, and just the level of granularity is different. So I think as one is building their system in the 160s. It's good to like keep adding and removing things that don't work, right? Keep tinkering
Yeah.
with it to get more comfortable.
Yeah. And it's also like learning anything, even exciting things,
Yeah.
is really boring at the beginning and it sucks kind of, right? It's like annoying to practice going in and out of an eddy line, but you need to learn that to be able to do whitewater rafting, which is very exciting, but like a lot of the elements of it are really boring. Same with skiing or learning music. Like it's like very
The
repetitious.
scales.
Yeah, super, super boring. That's
Yeah.
why I can't play any instruments.
Yeah.
I could never get through it. But there is a reward once you get past that level. Then you are able to then kind of be in the flow and like be able to do things that are exciting and fun. And a lot of people will hear somebody say, "Oh, I really enjoy the LSAT. The LSAT's really fun for me," and they're like, "I can't even imagine what you're talking about. That's
Yeah.
crazy talk." And it's like once you get to a certain level, it is fun. It is a
Yeah.
challenge, and you are competent enough to take it on. So it does become like this really fun challenge that you get to do, and going like really deep on the specific concepts that are still tripping you up.
Yeah, I think that's a great point that you made, because I think, at least for me, I started to like have more fun or kind of be more in control once I was in the 160s, where like, like conditional logic is starting to make like
Right.
this makes sense. And there's still some gaps, but um it, it's it's more comfortable. Um I would say the thing that you noted on like making something exciting or boring, I think it's quite helpful to maybe like be comfortable with experimenting, right? Like maybe you did certain things and you got into the 160s. Like it's okay to try new things. Like one thing that I think is particularly helpful is, once you're in the 160s, you're comfortable enough to like explain why you like, you're able to explain your reasoning. Whereas maybe in the
Yeah.
150s, you choose an answer, it's like, it just feels right, but it's like, okay, like can you elaborate? Like, what don't you like about that one, right? So in the 160s, you're starting to like have a framework to like discuss these topics and explain to others. So like I think one thing that is good practice is like, if you're on forums and someone's like, oh, I don't understand this question, you go in and you try to type out and like diagram what you're saying, argue for your point like concisely and clearly,
Hmm.
um, and just be able to engage at that level, I think is quite helpful. And the thing that I've noticed is like for maybe 160s, like you're starting to play in that space, like starting to be like a participant in that space, versus in the 170s, they can like very concisely like get at the core of what this is and explain it, right? So that's just a level of um like understanding.
Yeah, and just raw vocabulary.
Yeah,
In the like LSAT specific vocabulary. Like
yeah,
you have to learn a little bit of a different language to be able to discuss these things.
yeah.
Like conditional reasoning. Maybe some people haven't even come across that kind of phrasing of it. Everyone knows like an if then statement, but
Yeah.
they don't know like maybe the
Contrapositive?
terminology.
Excuse me?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Or valid arguments versus invalid
yeah,
arguments, soundness versus unsound argument. There is a level of just vocabulary that you're learning at the beginning to be able to create this language around logic and how you're breaking down arguments and how you're discussing things. So when you're at like a 160, you've kind of developed a good amount of that, and you can start to venture into the all right, well, now I'm going to try to use this language to explain what I'm doing, and it's surprisingly difficult and
yeah,
gives you a level of understanding that is again surprisingly deeper
yeah,
than you would expect.
yeah. And I think it is kind of surprising, right? Because oftentimes, it's like, why do you think that, or like, what are your thoughts? And it's kind of hard to like articulate why
Yeah.
concisely one is better, or like what are the multiple things wrong with like a competing answer. So that I think that explaining process is very helpful. Also, when in talking to others, right? I think um, then you're able to pick apart like what they're saying and like synthesize
Right.
what they're saying. And I think at the 160s level, should you interact with others. I think that is a good way to become more comfortable.
Right. And you can start to hear some of the nuance that they're talking about too.
Exactly. Like
That
very,
you
very subtle, right? That
yeah.
is just starts becoming clearer. Yeah.
Yeah. For sure. And I remember this very distinctly when I very first started teaching the LSAT. And I was teaching, in retrospect, a pretty complicated logic game. But to me, I was like, this is very easy. I can go through that. Like, it's a very easy game for me to do. And I was like, all right, I'll pick this game because I'll be able to teach it really well. And then I went in and just made, and and this is part of like, it wasn't a real situation; it was a training situation. And I went in and made a total mess of it. and this is when I was already firmly in the ones had already scored a 170s plus score. Even then, trying to articulate what I was thinking and what was going, like, it was automatic for me to do it, but it was very difficult. And
Yeah.
as very specific questions came out, I was really found myself grasping for, like, some sort of way to explain it clearly. And I remember
Yeah.
walking away and just be like, how did that go so poorly?
Yeah.
And knowing that I needed to, like, really get, talk about this stuff more frequently and more deeply and think about my process and like talk to myself more and be like,
Yes.
okay, well, here's why this is happening. And like just having a conversation internally with myself as I'm doing, not just performing the action,
Yes.
but actually like describing it in words that would be useful to somebody who maybe, isn't myself.
Yeah. I yeah, I think I've had a similar experience where it's um in explaining something, right? Like say LSAT or how to like do a trick on a skateboard. I think as people are like higher level and can more consistently do like the desired outcome, like score within a certain range, like do a kickflip, etc. They're able to kind of get at the crux very, very quickly, right? Like, oh,
Yeah.
in the skateboard example, like actually put your foot here, or like this variable is like that actually leads to like you can consistently do a trick, or
Yep.
um, it's like there's a level of like you'll notice that like high scores can be like more succinct, where they just clearly um tell you like what's at the core. Um, and a lot of that comes from like clear internal dialogue, and that also piggybacks and leads to like that moving average being a little bit more controlled, right? Where I think definitely when you entered at 160s, there's still, at least for me, it's still a little fluctuation, right? Like, oh, like I'm
Yeah.
on the moon, like I'm over here, like oh no, what happened? I'm here, right? Whereas once you're higher and higher, it's like you're within this. It's very a little bit more contained, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, when there's like 10 variables that need adjusting, it's very hard to to get them dialed in. But as you like, as you've set each individual variable and you get down to the last few, it does become a lot clearer that like, oh yeah, this foot needs to be moved a little bit this way, or
Mhm.
your balance or your weight needs to be shifted a little bit that way. And so people can actually help you more once you have a little bit more of a foundation, a little bit stronger of a foundation to stand on.
I like that skateboarding example because there are a lot of things going on, and if we were to
Yeah,
like parallel it back to this, it's like say you're in like the low 160s, and then the difference between that and like maybe high 160s, 170s is like your foot is just naturally going to be in the right place. Whereas before you had to look for it, right? You have that. That's one less thing to not think about. That
yeah,
that's in your toolbox, and um, I think I would suggest for those entering the 160s and into 160s to um, you know be aware, or try to be aware of the things that trip them up, right? We want to like say like during, we've mentioned like blind review before, when we go over our things, is it a surprise what we got wrong? Like how um like are we aware of what we don't know, and um can we adjust accordingly so that we have more firm foundations to keep building.
yeah. And I love your idea of writing out explanations for things that other people miss, but also a ton of students that I've worked with have found a lot of value in writing out explanations for themselves.
Exactly.
Uh,
Yeah.
and so that forces you to be able to have find the words to get it done. And then you can show that explanation to somebody else and be like,
Yeah.
does this make sense? Like, do you get this? Even a non-LSAT taker, like
Yeah.
ideally, even someone who's not taking the LSAT should be able to read that and be like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. And that can be difficult to do though. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. One thing that I really like what you just said there is the concept, and we've touched on this before, of like wrong answer journal or something, just, you know, it putting to writing like one's thoughts as to why they made that mistake and what they can do better. And one thing you'll notice is, um, I feel like, in trying to implement this, sometimes it'll be like, well, I got this wrong. Okay, read better next time. It's like, well, like that's
Yeah.
not very actionable. Like, what
Yeah.
does it mean to read better, right? So,
Yeah.
I know I've had some people recently tell me like, oh, John, I love just taking like paper tests. Like, I'll print it out. I'm like, oh yeah, like I've I've worked with a lot of paper tests. Like, I also like that better. And like, instead of just saying like, read better, it's like in RC, let's look for like pivots and like changes in like directionality, or um, you know, oh man, they always get me for the like da 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 like accept questions. It's like, okay, let's like understand, like there's gonna be four answers that are in this direction. Like every time I see this type of question type, I'm gonna put my pen to like
Mhm.
each word, and there's like these little actionable things that you can more readily implement. So I 100% back up the idea of like the wrong answer journal or like mistake.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I would even say, if anyone who's watching this, if you feel like you've got an explanation to a question and you don't have anybody to show it to, throw it in the comments.
Yes.
JP and I will take a look at it and we'll let you know. We'll kind of grade your explanations, give you some guidance as to how it's looking, and we're more than happy to give you some feedback. So,
I'm just smiling because I think it's actually very, very helpful to talk to others, like while you're in this process. And I liked how earlier on you said like even to people who like aren't studying LSAT. And I remember back in the day, I'd be in cafes, and my friend next to me would be, I don't know, doing some like grad school work, or just something completely unrelated, right? And I'd be like, hey, listen, and there was a light bulb moment. I just try to explain something to them, and I would notice when I really understood it, I said it clearly, and they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But other times when I'm left, right, they're like, what is this guy talking about? So preferably LSAT person, but even if it's not LSAT person, there's still some good utility there.